funny faces?
I don't know. I thought that's what you was doing.
No, I'm trying to get you a moment for the thumbnail, so I'm just smiling at the camera.
Oh, I thought you was making...
I
thought you was making funny faces at the camera.
Hello and welcome to everyone listening to the Written in Melanin podcast, the place where you come to get your weekly dose of melanated creativity. I'm your host, CM Lockhart, an author of fantasy books featuring black girls who aren't all that nice, and the owner of the Melanin Library, your online database for books by black authors. And in this space, I share with you everything I've learned on my journey as a black and indie author. I'm glad you're here. So welcome to episode number 36, you guys. So, as y'all know, normally I'm just sitting here, it's me, it's the camera, it's the mic, and y'all are just getting this raw, I'm not gonna say unfiltered, but basically unfiltered version of me, myself, my journey, my books, the knowledge that I have. Y'all are just getting who I am and what I have to offer, right? So for this episode, I figured since I've been doing a lot more sprints on YouTube and y'all always hear me talking about, oh, my husband Ben and Ben this and Ben that and Ben reads my stories. I figured this episode is Meet Ben. So.
Hi.
The sponsored book for this podcast episode is Kinetics by Multimind. This new adult fantasy horror follows Ava and Tyrone, twins who have always shared everything. They've always been two parts of the same whole, but when Ava discovers she's part of something bigger, things begin to change. She's now faced with a new choice: remain by Tyrone's side or become another one of his victims. This book released in September of 2022. You can read the full description of the book on the Melanin Library website. Just head to melaninlibrary.com or check the link in the show notes. If you're an author and would like your book advertised with us, then check out the services page on the Melanin Library website or check the link in the show notes. But that's it, y'all. Let's get back to the podcast. This is Benjamin, you guys. This is my husband. We have been married for 8 years at this point.
8 years.
Yeah. And we've been together for like, what?
Over 10.
Over 10. Oh, wow. So, little backstory. Met Benjamin when I was 16. We started dating shortly after my 17th birthday.
Yep.
And we have been together since. So, I am currently at the ripe old age of 28.
They can do math.
I'm currently at the ripe old age of 28, so do your math from there. But yeah.
At least they don't know how old I am.
Anyway. Today, you guys, I just wanted to kind of introduce y'all to him and explain to y'all, like, this is what my author journey entails. It entails this person. And basically when I'm telling y'all that, like, when I write my stories and then I pass it off to Benjamin, like, this is who's reading it. This is who's giving me feedback. And I know, like, some people are like, Chelsea, but what does that mean? And I'm just like, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. So, Benjamin, as you can see, you're on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank
I just
you.
need y'all to know that he had no idea what we were talking about. He just sat down in front of the camera to do this. And I'm pretty sure he still has no idea what I'm about to ask him. So this is completely unfiltered. I just need y'all to know that. So.
What's up?
Benjamin. You're married to an author.
That I am.
You are. How does that make you feel?
It's awesome. It's really awesome. I get to read before anybody else.
Okay, so just so you all know, when you're doing an interview with someone and they ask you an open-ended question like that, you should expound on the answer.
I was going to expound. I just needed to say to think about it.
Let me ask a more specific question.
Okay.
You know, obviously he enjoys being married to me because I'm amazing, right?
True.
But being married to me, right? One of the things that I always ask you to do is obviously to read my stuff. Did you read this much before you met me?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so would you say that I've been an influence on you and your reading habits?
Yes, you have been an influence on me and my reading habits. I mean, I guess reading is kind of contagious. If I see you reading, I kind of was like, well, you know, I could read something, you know? And we read different things, but I definitely read a lot more now.
He reads more than me, you guys. So and I know that sounds weird coming from me, but y'all know this. I don't read a whole lot. Like, I read, but I don't read a lot. Like, this man devours light novels. And something that I tell you guys all the time is that, I like to watch anime. I like to read manga. That's like my choice of my medium of relaxation, let's say.
Same here.
So it's one of those things that, like, as you read more stories, obviously, being married to me, one of the things that Ben and I do a lot in our household is we break down stories and we talk about, oh, this is what makes this great and this is what makes this not so great. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I started doing.
It happens all the time with every story we partake in.
Is it frustrating for you?
It's not frustrating, it's fun, but at the same time, we pause things constantly. So it might take us a while to get through anything, but it's like, no, we're going to know why we liked it, why we didn't like it. We're going to be talking about it. It's like, if we get through a whole episode of something and we don't say anything, either it was really, really good or one of us done fell asleep. Because we analyze everything. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
All right.
You're fine. But yeah, so that being said, one of the things that I really want to talk to you about on the podcast is, I tell people all the time that, I pass my stuff along to you. How does that make you feel knowing that, like, you are my primary feedback provider? And for those of you who don't know, primary feedback provider is exactly what it sounds like. So if you haven't tuned in to any of the previous episodes of the podcast, what you need to know is that basically what that means is that when I write something, I go over it myself. But then after I'm done going over it, before there's a step for me in between, okay, send it to my critique partner or send it to beta readers and reviewing it myself, right? So I'll go over it myself, but once I'm like, okay, I'm satisfied with this, then I pass it off to Ben. He's my primary feedback provider. And basically what that means is, like, if he says, nah, this isn't good, I'm not with it, then I go back to the drawing board. It doesn't go anywhere else. It's a very linear system and it works for me. And obviously, we didn't always function this way, but that's something that I wanted to ask you for, the people on the podcast who potentially have spouses or significant others or friends who want to, like, be a part of their journey. Like, as my primary feedback provider, like, how does it make you feel when I'm like, okay, like, will you read this? Because I know for a lot of people, that big hurdle is like, I love you, so I don't want to hurt your feelings. Ben doesn't have that problem.
I love you, so I will hurt your feelings.
Basically.
I love you, so I will tell you the truth. It's just like, the way I look at it is, I'm not going to let Chelsea go out nowhere and embarrass herself. So it's just like, if it's not good, I'm going to tell her it's not good. And that's just the reality of it. But as far as the process, I mean, I enjoy it a lot because I enjoy her writing. And part of the reason why I enjoy her writing is because it's literally tailored to me in some ways because I get the first say, So it's kind of cool. And we also have similar tastes because we watch the same things and we break down the same things or whatever. So we know what we're looking for as far as what makes stories good, what makes stories bad. And even when I'm not reading her stories, I'm listening to people analyze other stories. This is one of the things about being in the manga anime community. There are people that have discussions on, like, every little thing with every little episode of every little anime, and everybody has an opinion on it. Some of them are valid, some of them are not valid, but being able to sift through and break them all down, like, that's what I do in my downtime. So I'm constantly, like, listening and learning about different stories and how they work and the mechanics and what people like and what people don't like. So applying that to Chelsea's story is, it's just like I get my own little shot at it without having to be a YouTuber.
And I would say that, like, if you're looking for a primary feedback provider, I would say that it should definitely be someone that you trust, who knows you well enough that them hurting your feelings isn't going to negatively impact your relationship. Because just like for me, obviously I'm married to Ben, right? I'm not going nowhere, he's not going nowhere unless it's 6 feet under, right? So it's just kind of like, if he says something where it's like, mind y'all, it's not like, oh, this is trash. Like, it's nothing like that. It's more so like, you can do better, or I didn't really care for this. Or even recently, right? Transparency on the podcast. Very recently, while I was drafting We Are Dying Gods, I was on stream, right? Because for basically all of March, if you're listening to this in the future, March 2023, right? My deadline is March 21st, 2023. And I'm just like, okay, I got to get this done. And so I was on stream and I was like, I'm going to stream every day pretty much that I can so that I can hold myself accountable in a very public forum. So I was like, if I don't meet my word count goal, I have to account for that on the internet. It's not something that I'm going to just let slip by, right? And working with other people is very motivating and it helps keep me accountable. But while I was on stream one day, I was just like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to change up the story. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be dope. And I wrote it, and mind you, this scene is like 7,000 words. Like, it's not a little scene. It's like a major aspect. And I was like, cool. I would send it to Ben. He's going to love it. It's going to be great. And mind you, this happens sometimes. Sometimes I get in my feelings, and not in a negative way, in like a positive way. I start feeling myself. I'm like, yeah, I got the juice. Ben done like the last 10 chapters. I'm good. And so I sent it to him, and he read it. And mind y'all, we live together. So I'm sitting there, and we don't talk to each other while he's reading it, right? That's like one of our rules. So if you're getting to the point, right? Couple things. One, if you have a primary feedback provider, we're going to touch on a couple of basic rules that I think you should be in place. But the first one is that we do not talk to each other while he's reading the chapter. He has to read it straight through just like any other reader would, right? He doesn't get to ask the author questions while he's reading it.
But I do leave lots of comments.
He leaves comments, and we live together, so I can see him leaving comments. And I'm like, oh my God, what is he doing? Why is he typing? Why is it? It's been like an hour. Why is he still on this scene? What is happening?
Lots of comments.
And so
comments can be both good and bad, you guys. It's not like
Yeah.
every time something's wrong, I'm making a comment. It's more like every time I have a thought about something, I'm making a comment. Like, this character's making me feel so-and-so. Or, Sarah's being stupid again. You know, or whatever. You know, we just...
And sometimes it's just emojis, like he's laughing or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's really helpful for me as an author, because it's just like, okay, is the humor coming across? Did this read the way that I wanted it to read? Is he getting from this what I want it to get? Mind you, Benjamin's biased. We live together. He knows me better than anybody else. So we have a very similar sense of humor. So the things that I meant to be funny, he generally finds funny. That doesn't work for everybody.
We always get the same references, you know, so it's just like some things, they're just going to be inbuilt, but other things, you know, it's just like, if I don't understand it, it's just like, then maybe somebody else isn't going to understand it either. It probably needs to be clarified if I don't get it.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that Ben would be sitting there leaving comments, and I'm like, crap, okay, what's happening? And then we'll come back to it. And like I said, I sent him, this happened recently, and he was just like, yeah, it was good, because he's like, you know, the scene itself was written well, but also he was like, but this kind of breaks the story. Like, this completely removes the villain and like the purpose of the entire book. Like, I left this chapter feeling like, okay, so what am I reading the rest of the book for? And I was just like, okay, well, we definitely don't want that to happen. And it's just kind of like, it hits, but also I need someone who's going to tell me that. And sometimes, especially when you don't have a writing community, because let's be real here, right? I've been in this writing community for a while, but I've also been actively searching for a community and actively building a community. And because of the platform that I have with the podcast and with the YouTube channel and with the Melanin Library, I have a lot of inbuilt ways to naturally talk to authors and open up a dialogue. And a lot of times that naturally leads to, oh, I like you as a person, and I keep in touch with them. And that builds out a community in a very organic way. Everybody doesn't have that what was the word I'm looking for?
That community, that support system.
That privilege, right?
Privilege. Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have that privilege to be like, oh, I have this platform so I can naturally meet people. So it's just like, if you do have people in your life, because let's be real here, as authors, especially if you're new to this authoring, or if you are a serious introvert and just talking to people that you don't know gives you anxiety. A lot of times when we need feedback, we rely on the people in our lives to be that. So I say all this to say that for sure, get someone who's going to be honest with you. And I stress honest, because Honestly, y'all, We Are the Origin would not have been what it was if Ben was not reading the chapters and giving me feedback. And I talk about it all the time, how I sent him the first chapter and he was like, no. And I was in the kitchen cooking and he was just like, yeah, I don't like it. And that's the thing. Ben will tell me if he doesn't like it. And because I know that he will tell me when he doesn't like something, I can trust his opinion when he says that he does. I don't necessarily trust anyone who's like, everything that I send them, they're like, oh yeah, this is great. This is good. I think this works. No, it doesn't. Some things don't work. That's just the reality of it. And having someone in your corner who can be like, yeah, nah, this ain't it, homie. I'm gonna need you to do a little better. It's like, that helps. That helps. So
Yep.
I was getting to the point of, if you do have a primary feedback provider, obviously get someone who you trust, get someone who's going to be honest with you, get someone who's not going to be afraid to hurt your feelings, but also get someone who consumes stories. I think one of the things that we as authors do to set ourselves up for failure inadvertently is we ask our moms, our sisters, our cousins, someone who we like and we trust, but who doesn't read widely or doesn't think about what they're reading, because
or storytelling in general,
because being able to not only understand what makes a story good, but being able to articulate why something isn't working is really important. And that's why I appreciate Ben as my primary feedback provider, because it's not just, like I said, that last chapter that I sent him, it wasn't just, oh, this isn't working, but I'm not sure why. It was like, this isn't working because it takes away my motivation to read the next chapter.
It took away the sense of direction of the story. I didn't know where the story was going next.
Exactly. And being able to articulate that means I know what to do to go back and fix what it is that I'm working on. So, that being said, how do you go about getting your own primary feedback provider? I have no idea. Honestly, I lucked out. I lucked out because, like I said, when we first started dating and when we first got married, you weren't reading manga and light novels and stuff like that.
Nope.
It was more like we were watching anime together, and then that just kind of expanded into, okay, now we're reading manga because we want to know what happens next. And it started with One Piece. Yeah.
One Piece makes all the difference.
So we're not going to get on One Piece rant on my podcast. So, no. Anyway, if y'all don't know, if you don't watch anime, if you don't read manga, One Piece is literally the best-selling fiction book in the world. Period. Yeah. Bar none. Yeah. Bar none. And it's the short version of it is it's about a kid who wants to be king of the pirates and his adventure in doing so. You can look it up. There are plenty of content on it. It's very long. It's very entertaining, but it's also one of our favorite manga, period, bar none. Yeah. And because we got into watching One Piece and then we got into reading One Piece, that led us into reading more manga that wasn't One Piece, and then that led Ben to reading light novels. I don't read light novels, and that's just something that I think I've talked about on other places that I could get into later, but for me, I don't enjoy reading light novels because I'm just kind of like, if I'm going to read a book, I kind of want to read one with black people in it. Manga is a little bit different, but that's a whole other conversation with a lot of nuance. But I don't really like light novels. He does. And because of that, it leads to conversations that I find really helpful. Yeah. But yeah, but I guess if I had to say how to go about getting a primary feedback provider, I would say reach out to people who read first and foremost, and also keep in mind that your primary feedback provider does not have to be somebody who's close to you. It just so happened that Ben turned out to be mine, but honestly, a primary feedback provider could also be your critique partner. It could be a really good beta reader. There are different names for it, but ultimately it just boils down to just having someone tell you when you need to do better.
Can I say what I think makes me good at the job?
Sure, Benjamin. Also, I need y'all to know, if you have read We Are the Origin, I need you to know that Roth is based off of Benjamin and his ego.
Look.
Go ahead. What makes you good at what you do?
Look, I consume stories. I consume a lot of reviews for stories. So I'm used to people analyzing things and breaking them down. which I think helps out a lot. So it's like I think critically about the stories that I consume. Because like you can watch a lot of TV and be consuming TV that has no story at all, something that's episodic, something that doesn't really matter, that's just like mindless and you watch the time go by. And it's just like there are things like that and there's nothing wrong with watching things like that. But that's not the same as like consuming stories and breaking them down and actually, you know, being able to provide meaningful feedback. So I think that's very important. Another thing that I do that helps Chelsea out a lot that she forgot to mention, I read every chapter she sends me the day she sends them to me.
That's so important. Like, okay, here's the thing. Your primary feedback provider, if you give somebody the role of primary feedback provider, in my mind, here's the hierarchy, right? You got author at the top. Like, you read it as you're writing it. You can't not read the book, right? As the author, right? Underneath that, you got your primary feedback provider, which means basically as soon as you're done, as soon as you're like, yeah, this is it, they're reading it. They're not waiting a day. They're not waiting a week. They're not like, I'll get to it when I get to it. They're like, right now, I'm finna read it. I'm finna get into it.
Yeah.
And then after that, you have your critique partner who's like, okay, well, give me a week, right? And then under that, you have your beta readers who are like, give me a couple of months, right? Your primary feedback provider is your day one, your ride or die. Like, yeah, I'm right here in the trenches with you. If they don't read it, it holds up the process.
Yep. That's why it's important because she's actively drafting. It's just like she's going to bust out another 5,000 words tomorrow. She got to make sure this last 5,000 words was right. So it's just like I have to go ahead and read it.
Yeah.
I have to be ready to read it, you know.
And also keep in mind that this works for my process because as I talk about on my stream and on my channel in general and on the podcast, I edit as I go along. So like I mentioned with that last chapter that I sent to Ben where he was just like, this takes away the direction of the book. Before I can write the next chapter, I need to fix that because here's the thing. If that chapter takes away the direction of everything else, it doesn't matter what comes after if I don't fix this point right here, you know? So for me, I have to go back. But if you're one of those authors and you know that you just like to zero draft, right? You like to just throw everything at the wall, get everything down and get it done, get it out, then this may not be the method for you. Or if you know that you're someone who you don't like play-by-play feedback, essentially, then this method is not for you. But if you guys were curious about how I do things, this is an integral part of how I do things. I need like real-time feedback so that I can change and critique my story as necessary. It's kind of like if you're building a house, right, and you're putting up support beams, you're going to test that support beam right then and there. You're not going to wait until everything is done and you've put up, you know, drywall and plaster and paint and a roof to be like, okay, is this beam going to hold? Wait a second. It's too late to be testing it now. It should have been tested, you know, back when you had time to change it without having to wreck everything else around it. That's how I think about it.
What we say all the time is somebody can only read something for the first time. So even though I'm the first person that gets Chelsea's writing, she goes over it. She rereads it before she sends it to me. And sometimes that might mean that she has to wait a day before she can send it to me to see if it feels right with her, if it sits right with her. Because what you don't want to do, you don't want to send your primary feedback provider 10,000 versions of the same chapter. Because then your feedback gets muddled. They'll end up knowing information that you took out that's not actually there. They'll end up comparing things, and that's not going to give you the true, authentic first-time experience anymore. So you want to do the best that you can or whatever, but, you know, it's still raw. I mean, there's still going to be typos and things like that. But as far as, like, the story, the content, the structure, you have to be confident in it when you send it to your primary feedback provider.
Yeah.
Because that is their first experience.
And I will say this, some general guidelines, right, based off of what Ben just said. Some general guidelines for primary feedback provider. And I'm going to keep saying this and reiterating it so it sticks with you guys. 1, find someone who you trust, okay? You want someone who is going to read your stuff and be honest with you. So someone that you trust, someone's going to be honest with you, someone who is not going to be afraid to hurt your feelings because it's not going to like completely ruin your relationship if they tell you that you need to go back to the drawing board and do better, right? But you also need to get somebody who reads a lot of stories and can think critically about what it is that you're reading. You want someone who can read your story when you need them to read it, basically. And like Ben said, you want someone who can offer you like real feedback as far as comments and everything else, but also keep in mind they are not your editor. So they are not going to be giving you line by line edits, be like, oh, you need a comment here, you need this, you need that. For the most part, they are looking at your content, right? Yeah. But then also keep in mind that you can only read something for the first time. So for me, what that looks like Ben said, I will write a chapter, but then I will sit on it for a day or two. And sometimes I'm not like necessarily just writing a draft and then off it goes to Ben. I reread it, and if I don't like it, then I rewrite it without it ever going to him. Because I'm like, if I as the author don't like it and I don't think this is the best I can do, then it's not going to him. There's no point in him reading it if I'm like, I know that as the author, I'm going to go ahead and change this. Right? So there's that aspect of it. But there's also the aspect of, we don't talk about my book in the meantime, in between time. I don't tell him what's coming up next. I don't tell him extra things that I know. Sometimes he has questions. Sometimes he has theories. Sometimes there are things that I know, plot twists that are coming up and he's at an earlier version where the plot twist hasn't come up yet. And, we're talking about it. And it's just kind of like talking to somebody where it's just like, if you're talking to somebody and they have only read the first book of a series and you've read the entire thing and you're the one who recommended the series to them, you're not going to tell them what happens in the 7th book when they're still reading the first one. Mm-hmm. You're going to talk about what they know based off of what's happened in the first book. Yeah. And that's how we navigate at home as well. It's just like, we not talking about what's coming up next.
She doesn't give me any spoilers. I don't know what's in the next chapter. I don't know whose perspective the next chapter is even from. None of that.
I don't bounce ideas off of Ben, and that's part of what makes this work. I'm not like, oh, do you think Sarah should do this in the next chapter? Or do you think Brandy should do this? The only time we talk about it is in the past tense with what he's already read, and sometimes what he theorizes will come next. And one of the things that I do that I find really helpful is just asking, okay, well, what questions do you have? Because that helps to focus my writing for some of the future chapters, because it's like, okay, this is what readers are thinking. This is what they want to know. This is where their attention is focused. And so that makes it a lot easier for me to pinpoint and direct my writing, because I'm like, well, let me go ahead and answer this question, or even let me table it for later. And I'm gonna let you sit with this question a little while longer so that you keep reading to figure out what the answer is. Yeah. And it helps me to get my pacing straight. So
yeah, that's part of the things I leave in the comments. It's the questions that I have. It's like, okay, so what implications does this have on the world? Does this mean that so and so did such and such, or or that blank character also knows this information and that's why they acted like such and such, or or should they be acting differently because they know this information? It's just like I point those things out in my comments. It's just anything that I feel, think, question. All those go into the comments. So it's just like on a chapter, I might have, I don't know, I don't count them, but you do. What is it, like 40 something comments?
50 some odd comments
per chapter.
Stressing me out. Like, bruh, why are you over here? It's been 2 hours. Why are you still on this chapter? It is only 4,000 words. Stressing me out.
Well, it takes longer when you're writing comments.
I'm just saying. Anyway, you guys, we are coming up on 30 minutes. So, obviously, this is the first time Ben has been on the podcast. If you guys enjoyed this little segment, let me know in the comments down below. And maybe he can come back for a couple more episodes, and we could talk more about writing in general, because, he really is a wealth of knowledge, you guys. I ain't even going front. I really do love this man, so I am biased, but he's also really intelligent, and that's part of the reason that I married him. So, if you guys are interested in seeing Ben on more episodes, let me know. If you have any questions that you specifically want him to answer, let me know that as well. And also, something that I'm considering doing in this moment is I may post one of the chapters from We Are the Origin that Ben commented on, so you can kind of see what that process looks like. If I do that, obviously it's only going to be for my Patreon, so I suggest that you sign up, patreon.com/CM Lockhart. But yeah, that is pretty much it. Thank you for coming on the podcast, babe.
No problem.
And yeah, that is it for this episode of the Written in Melanin podcast, you guys. So if you found this podcast helpful and would like to speak with me one-on-one about your book, or have any questions about indie publishing, then check out my coaching services. I'm always happy to help guide writers on their indie publishing journey. And if you'd like to support the podcast, then please share it with someone that you think may enjoy it. Grab a copy of my book, We Are the Origin, or the upcoming We Are Dying Gods from my website, cmlockhart.com, or request my book at your local library. There are links for everything down in the show notes, and as always, I appreciate you guys for listening. So, until next time, I hope your days are lovely and your books are full of melanin. Bye.
Peace.